America's first major ground war began even before it was a country. The American Revolutionary War started in 1775 because Britain controlled the colonies politically and economically, without giving them representation in Parliament. Taxes on paper, tea, and daily goods were imposed to pay for Britain's wars in Europe. For the colonists, this wasn't just about money, it was about control. When protests turned violent and negotiations failed, war became inevitable. The result was independence, but also the creation of a nation that learned early that war could reshape power. Less than 4 decades later, the United States fought the War of 1812 against Britain again. Officially, the reason was British interference with American trade and the forced recruitment of American sailors into the British Navy. But beneath that was America's desire to expand westward and remove British influence from North America. The war ended without clear victory, but it reinforced American sovereignty and nationalism. In the mid-1800s, America turned its military inward. The Mexican-American War began in 1846 after the U.S. annexed Texas, a territory Mexico still claimed. The official justification was a border dispute. The real motive was expansion. The idea of manifest destiny convinced many Americans that the country was destined to stretch from coast to coast. The war ended with the U.S. taking nearly half of Mexico's territory, including California and much of the Southwest. Soon after came the bloodiest conflict on American soil, the Civil War. From 1861 to 1865, the U.S. fought itself. The southern states seceded primarily to preserve slavery, while the North fought to preserve the Union. Though often simplified, the war was driven by economic systems, political power, and moral conflict. It ended slavery, but left deep scars that still shape American society. By the end of the 19th century, America began looking beyond its borders. The Spanish-American War in 1898 was sparked by the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. Newspapers blamed Spain, though evidence was unclear. The war was short, but its consequences were huge. The U.S. emerged as a global power, gaining control over Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. In the Philippines, the U.S. then fought a brutal ground war against Filipino independence fighters who had expected freedom, not new rulers. World War I pulled the U.S. into Europe in 1917. Officially, America entered after German submarines attacked ships carrying American civilians, and after Germany sent a secret telegram proposing an alliance with Mexico. But economically and politically, the U.S. was already tied to Europe. American ground troops helped break the stalemate on the Western Front, and the war ended with the U.S. positioned as a global influence, though it later retreated into isolation. That isolation ended abruptly with World War II after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. The U.S. entered the war on 2 fronts. In Europe, American ground forces fought Nazi Germany to stop territorial expansion, genocide, and authoritarian rule. In the Pacific, the war against Japan was about survival, dominance, and control of trade routes. World War II reshaped the world order, leaving the US and the Soviet Union as rival superpowers. Almost immediately, the Cold War began not with direct battles, but with proxy wars. The first major one was the Korean War in 1950. North Korea invaded South Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and China. The US intervened under the banner of the United Nations to stop the spread of communism. The war ended in a stalemate, dividing Korea permanently, and setting the pattern for future conflicts. Vietnam followed, beginning with military advisors and escalating into full ground war by the mid-1960s. The US claimed it was defending South Vietnam from communism, but the war became long, costly, and deeply unpopular. Despite overwhelming firepower, the US could not defeat a determined guerrilla force fighting on home ground. By 1975, America withdrew. Vietnam exposed the limits of military power and permanently changed public trust in government. In the 1980s and 1990s, US ground forces were sent into smaller but significant conflicts. In Grenada, Panama, and later Somalia, Interventions were justified as protecting American citizens, restoring order, or preventing chaos. Somalia, in particular, showed how humanitarian missions could quickly turn into deadly ground combat with unclear goals. The Gulf War in 1991 marked another turning point. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, the U.S. led a coalition to push Iraqi forces out. The official reason was international law and regional stability. The deeper reason was oil, global trade, and preventing a hostile power from dominating the Middle East. Then came September 11, 2001. After terrorist attacks killed nearly 3,000 people, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan to destroy al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban government that sheltered them. What began as a focused mission turned into America's longest ground war. Despite trillions spent and 2 decades of fighting, the Taliban returned to power after U.S. withdrawal. 2 years later, the U.S. invaded Iraq again. The justification was weapons of mass destruction and alleged links to terrorism. Those weapons were never found. The invasion toppled Saddam Hussein, but it also destabilized the region, fueled sectarian violence, and created conditions for groups like ISIS to rise. In recent years, American ground forces have continued to operate in Syria, Iraq, and other regions under the banner of counterterrorism. These wars are often undeclared, limited, and distant from public attention, but they follow the same pattern: security threats, political decisions, and long-term consequences. Looking across all these wars, a pattern becomes clear. American ground wars rarely begin with a single cause. Each war is justified as necessary at the time. Each leaves consequences that last far longer than expected. Wars shape nations, but they also reveal them. And the story of America's wars is not just about battles won or lost, but about the choices made before the first soldier ever steps onto the ground.